The speech right away. I've posted the vocabulary in the chat as well as on the spreadsheet. So you've got the blue zone, centenarian, I explain what it is. And then there are lots of place names, and there's the name of a religious group, the Seventh-day Adventists, and microcirculation. So that's all you really need to know. Okay, everything else I explain. So without further ado, I'll get started. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Ladies, rather. We've got all women in the group, which is hardly surprising given the makeup of the interpreting profession. And I was always taught when I was younger never to ask a lady her age. So I won't do that. I'll be a gentleman. But I will volunteer my own age because this is a speech about aging. So I'll be honest. I'm 36 years old. And to be honest, it's kind of the perfect age for me. I've always wanted to be in my mid-30s because I think you're young enough to still have energy and still have optimism for the future, but you're old enough to be financially independent and to have a little bit of hindsight. You can kind of look back on your life to date and learn a few lessons and hopefully apply some of those lessons to the present and the future. And people always say, oh yes, you should live in the present, seize the moment, all of that. But of course, I think it's inevitable. We all think about getting older and we think about what our life will be like in our old age. And like most people, I want to live a long life, but I only want to live a long life if I can have good quality of life. So lately I've been reading about how to live a healthy, long life. And I stumbled upon an initiative called Blue Zones. Now, these blue zones were discovered by an Italian academic and a Belgian demographer. And they refer to a cluster of villages in Sardinia, on the Italian island of Sardinia. And it has the highest concentration of male centenarians. So we're talking about men who have reached 100 years old. And you might think that the term blue zone is very academic or very scientific. It must have some sort of connection, the color blue and old age, but actually not at all. It's completely by chance. The demographer and the academic just happened to have a blue marker with them that day that they circled the map with. So it could have been called the green zone or the red zone, but it happens to be called the blue zone. So they then broadened their research to other areas. They ventured out from Sardinia and they found that there are 4 other blue zones. So I'll just give you a run through of these other zones. There's the Japanese island of Okinawa. There's the area known as Loma Linda in California, which is home to a religious community known as the Seventh-day Adventists. Then there's the Nicoya Peninsula in Costa Rica and the Greek island of Icaria. And what these people have in common is that they all, the people in these blue zones, all have a higher chance of living to 100 years old. They suffer from fewer diseases and they enjoy more years of good health. So on average, they enjoy 12 more years of good health than the average American. Why is this? There are a few common features of these blue zones. They're all isolated areas, either geographically isolated in the case of the islands like Sardinia and Icaria. Some of them are mountainous areas, mountainous regions, or in the case of the area which has been colonized in a sense by the Seventh-day Adventists, they're cut off by choice because they're a religious community that are quite closed and quite insular. So they're cut off from the outside world, which means that their lifestyle is a little bit different. They don't live the lifestyle that we live in cities where you're stuck in traffic and you're on public transport and you're exposed to all sorts of pollutants and stress. But at the same time, they've also benefited from modernity to some degree. So, for example, the Italian island of Sardinia and the Greek island of Icaria have benefited from government subsidies to try to modernize the island and to stimulate the local economy. And these initiatives have lifted people out of the extreme poverty that was the case of their predecessors, their forefathers, after the Second World War. And they've also benefited from better healthcare and medical progress in general. So all of this is very nice, very useful research, but it's not very scientifically rigorous. The research was mainly based on going to these places, talking to people, observing. So scientists have now tried to make this research a little bit more scientifically rigorous. And there's been research carried out jointly by 2 universities, one based in Rome and one based in California. And they've chosen to focus on a small town in the south of Italy. And they've chosen this area because there's a very high proportion of older people who are living there, people in their 80s, 90s, over 100. And many of these people can walk without needing a cane, they can read without glasses, and they can hear without needing a hearing aid. So they're quite independent for their age. And as part of this research program, the scientists took blood from 81 people in the region. And they included some centenarians in this research. So some of the 81 people were people who were 100 or over. And they also included their descendants, so children, grandchildren, just to get a broad range of ages. And what they discovered was that the older people had many of the usual problems that older people have. So they had reduced kidney function, they had high blood pressure, they had a weak heart. But what really differentiated these older people in the south of Italy from some older people in other areas of the world was microcirculation. They had excellent microcirculation. So microcirculation is the blood supply which supports the organs, which basically pumps blood around to the organs. And in many cases, the older people had the exact same type of microcirculation, just as effective a microcirculation system as the young people. So it's quite surprising. And at the moment, it's hard to pinpoint exactly why this is the case, and further studies are being carried out. But there are some common practices which seem to be very common very commonplace in these areas. And maybe I could end this by sharing these with you and maybe giving you some tips if you want to live a long, healthy life yourself. So some of these factors, family seems to play a key role. So putting other people before yourself, surrounding yourself by people with people of different generations, not just older people, but having contact with children and grandchildren and all of that. The second factor seems to be not smoking. So people who smoke obviously have a lower life expectancy, but no offense to the Italians in the group, and many of you who have lived in or spent time in Italy or Southern Europe in general will know that this is not always the case. That there are people who smoke quite heavily in these areas. The next factor is semi-vegetarianism. So that means mainly consuming a plant-based diet and only eating fish or meat very occasionally. And good news for those of you who like pulses and legumes like chickpeas or nuts or beans. They are excellent for your health and for your longevity. You should also eat locally sourced fruit and vegetables. And it's believed that the rosemary in the south of Italy is particularly beneficial, particularly good for human health. And then the final factor is to have constant, moderate physical activity. So that means that you go out for a walk at least once a day, and you can combine that with some socializing. So you can play an active role in your community, see other people, not just stay at home, being inactive and in your own little bubble. So here are some tips just to finish up. For those of you who want to live a long, healthy life. You never know, we might even have some future centenarians among us. So I wish you all a long, healthy life, and hope you find the speech interesting. Thank you very much.